Hello and a very warm welcome back to Morsels and Motors. In today's video I'm going to show you around my Favorit Skoda, which is yes, this 1992 Skoda Favorit Forum, which means it's the base model. The Favorit ran from 1987, but it was only introduced into the UK in 1989 until about 1995 when it was taken over by the Felicia. In 1993 there was a new facelift, so it got a new grille and a much more kind of blandified interior, Volkswagenified I suppose. But I wanted to have a look around this example of a pre-facelift Favorit because it really does have some very special design touches that I really wanted to share with you on camera. A lot of people, I think, dismiss the Favorit as being a very dull, bland car, and that's absolutely not true. I think you might say from the shape it's not perhaps the most exciting, but the shape hides a lot of really interesting aesthetic detail that I get such a kick out of. The biggest thing you might not know about the Favorit is that it was actually a Bertone design. They were commissioned by Skoda in the early 80s to design a new hatchback for them to replace the ageing rear-wheel drive Estelle 105 model, and this is the design that they came up with. Now I've got some photos here from the Skoda Museum just in north of Prague that Jim went to, my friend, a few years ago and took some photos of the Favorit prototype, which is really very close to the production model, certainly from the outside. But as you'll see, the interior of the prototype really has a really funky, futuristic dashboard that looks almost modern even today, with a computer screen in the middle of the dash. Really very reminiscent of, my 2024 Kia, for example. I've never quite known where the Favorit sits in the kind of model range of traditional car classes. Is it a Super Mini? Is it a sort of Ford Escort-sized car? Well, Skoda, I think, answer that question in some of their marketing, where they say that for Fiesta money, you get an Escort-sized car. And I think actually Skoda's cars later on carry on that feeling, don't they? If you think of the Octavia, for example, it's based on the Mark IV Golf, but it gives you the size of a Mondeo car. So yeah, it's perhaps a Skoda thing. So let's have a quick look inside the boot, and I do love the way that this rear end has been designed. I love the fact that there is these blocky panels here, and those blocky panels are actually where the boot opens. You'd think that maybe the boot opens there, but if you click the handle here, you'll see that it actually splits there, which gives you a really nice wide opening and a really low, very modern for the time, hatchback loading lip. Let's have a proper look inside this boot. So we first of all have obviously gas struts. Parcel shelf strings are made of plastic, which I'm sure must be very fragile and very unobtainium, so I shall be very gentle with them. The parcel shelf itself is made of a moulded plastic. It's quite hard. The interior of the boot is entirely carpeted on both sides there, which is very plush. And you have this brown rattan carpet as well, extends to the boot floor. It's actually a very sizable boot. There's plenty of space for all sorts of things in there, which again kind of shows that it's way bigger than the Super Mini Fiesta class. Being the base model, which Skoda called the Forum, in the UK at least, you don't get a rear wiper. Concentrating still on the rear, one of my other favourite features of it is the shape of the heated rear window elements. It's not just a set of straight lines, and that sets the tone for me for the whole rest of the interior design and some of the exterior of this car. Somebody has gone for the aesthetic. Somebody has thought about it and made a bold decision to do something slightly different and not just tick a box to say it has a heated rear window. Even the fuel cap looks quite stylised, and I do love this little sticker on there which says unleaded or leaded 4-star, so you could put either into your Skoda. I also really love the steel wheels on this car, which are very basic steels with a nice centre cap going over the hub there. Really nice and sweet. My favourite exterior detail of the Favorit is this, which is the Skoda symbol that is embedded into the plastic casing of the door mirror, along with this kind of swage line going across the middle. It's that sort of design touch that I get such a kick out of, because you would think that for what is thought of as a budget, Eastern Bloc, communist-built car, that you would just go for sort of square, plain, black plastic door mirrors. But they haven't done that. They've styled them because they clearly want to tell a story, tell a design story, an aesthetic with this car, and that's the sort of thing I get really excited about. And there are more of those as we go along around the car. We get another reminder of our Forum badging here. Again, reminder, that does mean base. It does look more posh, doesn't it, or like a special edition, but it's not, it just is the base. Moving across the front of this Skoda, and you will see that the badge is very central, and this is actually a unique grille for sort of 92, 93 cars. Before that, the badge was offset to one side. I also don't know whether the colour of this car comes out that well on screen. I'll be interested to see, because it's actually, on my phone it looks more blue, but the reality is it's much more turquoise, it's more teal. It's an absolutely beautiful colour. It's actually a similar problem to the uniforms on Star Trek The Next Generation, the medical ones. They were actually very, very teal, very green almost in reality, but on screen they appeared blue. It's very strange what tricks the camera makes with particular shades of colour. Another little neat bit of design is that the front kind of bluff edge of these wings are followed through onto the bonnet line over there. It's a very complete and cohesive design. The door handles of the Favorit, I am told, are carried on from the Estelle, and it's not the only feature that is actually. Which is actually really interesting, given that it is a top-down new design. They did carry over some bits, which is very normal in motoring manufacturing. So I think the ignition switch is also from an Estelle, and there are a couple of other kind of bits of interior trim and switchgear that come. Obviously the engine being the major one, which we'll come to in a bit. Okay, let's have a proper look inside. So if we operate the very kind of chunky style door handle, open the door, we get quite a bit of body coloured metal on show, and the first hints at the brown that is everywhere in this car. Different shades of brown as well. So we have a quite basic vinyl door card with this kind of, can you see the sort of melted in lines there? By 1992, that was a little bit old fashioned, I would say, because that's, you know, we had that in my Metro from 1981-ish. So yeah, that's a little bit basic. But then the rest of the door I really, really love. I absolutely love this door pull. It's my favourite feature of the entire car, certainly the interior, is that they have styled the door pull to say the word Skoda. And I love that there will have been meetings after meetings where this was discussed, and they will have decided and overruled the accountants and said, no, we want the door handle to say Skoda and not to be plain. So you actually pull on this to move the door forwards and backwards, this bit, and then that is the popper to actually unlock the catch. Moving to the side, we have the window winder, and again, I love the design of this. Just look at it. Just look at it. It's so beautifully symmetrical, and the knob is reflected in the kind of the bit that turns. We have this cutout in the middle of it. It's just gorgeous. Oh my goodness. That level of design elegance is something that I was absolutely not expecting on a base model Skoda from the late 1980s. I also love that those lines in the vinyl, the pressed lines in the vinyl, go down through the door handle and are then reflected in the plastic moulding of this door bin. Isn't that just great? See, they line up. That's so cool, and such attention to detail. It really blows my mind. Let's turn to the actual cabin itself, and we've got a lot of brown, as you can see. The seats are trimmed in this kind of, I think it's a velour, kind of a two-tone velour with a little bit of red in that as well, a little bit of grey possibly. We've got greyish brown plastic headrests. There should also be headrests in the rear. They were standard on the base model to have the rear headrests. Unfortunately, they were not with this car when the owner bought it, and he cannot find them for obvious reasons of unobtainium 30 odd years after it was made. Let me step inside and we'll have a look at the dash. Let me do a pan of the dashboard so you get a feel of it. So we actually have two tones going on here. I initially thought that this was faded, but it's not. It's a different type of material, but it's meant to be two-tone. It's a sort of biscuity beige, whereas that's much more of a brown underneath. That's a harder fabric or harder material, whereas this is a little bit softer, it's a bit squidgier. You can just about see there. Let's start off with the instrument cluster, which gives you a little bit of luxury in that it has a rev counter over there. This is a very comprehensive dashboard for a base model cheap car from the early 90s. It's quite impressive. You also get a temperature gauge, which you certainly don't get in sort of Peugeot-y Citroën cars, and a huge amount of different warning lights over there, loads of them. It also shows the mileage of this car, which is just extraordinary at 29,000 miles. Yeah, all the warning signs of that, including a seatbelt warning light as well, which is really impressive. Moving to the right of the instrument cluster, we've got some blanks, do love a blank, and then a fog light on that side, nice switches. Down here underneath, we've got the ignition barrel, which I'm told is from an Estelle, and an air vent over there. The steering wheel is quite big. It's a little bit squishy, which is really very nice to hold. And I do like these little stylised ribs here, and obviously the Skoda symbol in the middle. Again, it's not a boring steering wheel, is it? We've then got some indicator stalks on this side as a standard indicators and lights. They aren't perhaps the nicest to operate, and you'll see in a minute that the clicking relay for the indicators is really strangely loud. Anyway, on the right hand side we've got the wiper controls, only the front wipers of course. Down here under the steering wheel we do have headlight light adjusters, so again we do get some really quite posh features in this base model car. Turning to the centre console, we've got two very large air vents there, which are really well placed to give you ventilation straight to the face, which is fantastic. We have a little cubby hole there, and then four buttons here, which have quite a nice action to them. They're nice and clicky. Oh, you can hear the click of the indicators there. The relay's just behind here as well. Click, click, click. Heated rear window. That is the side lights, and then we have a separate button there for the main lights, which is quite fun. I think they can be, no, they can't be operated separately, so you have to have side lights on first and then main lights. That's quite quirky. Moving down we have the ventilation controls, so I think we have a 3-speed fan there. It's quite clicky, and then we've got that's distribution of air, and I'm not entirely sure, though that's heat. I'm not sure what that is. That must be fresh air or something like that. Yes, I think it is. Below that we've got space for a cigarette lighter, but that's not there because base model. But we do still get a massive ashtray, as is par for the course in this generation of car. Underneath that is another cubby hole where a radio could be fitted, but it was never fitted to this particular car, so the owner has kept it without a radio to keep the originality. Below that is a little bit of a centre console that is actually not standard on the base model Forum spec, but it was added by the dealer when the car was ordered. And I'm told that Skoda at the time used to add quite a lot of extras to their cars, perhaps to help get them out of the showroom, I suppose. It also shows here a 5-speed gear stick, which is again another feature that makes this car less kind of basic than you would imagine. Looking down into the middle of the car, we have obviously a manual handbrake and some seat belts, but what I love about them is it's all brown plastic. It very much reminds me of my early Volvo 343. Every single bit of moulded plastic in this car, apart from the bottom of that gear stick, is brown of some shade. It's just glorious. Bring back brown, I say. The brown theme continues onto the A-pillars and the roof line. So we have this quite interesting panel above the heads of the driver and passenger, which is it's large. It's a huge bit of plastic which houses the sun visors, courtesy light, and I'm guessing sunroof controls if it had a sunroof, and obviously the large rear view mirror. So it's all very modern, and it does remind me a bit of the Citroën BX as well, this unit above the driver and passenger. On the passenger side itself then we do have a glove box which opens by pulling that little catch there, and it pops up like that and shows that Simon had Vandenpla parking in Rusterville, which is where I saw this car for the first time and got so excited to see it I wanted to do a video of it. So there we go. Close that glove box. Quite sizable, quite good, and it doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart in your hands either. Getting into the back is very easy on a Favorit because it is 5 doors and it was the only body style it came in. Although interestingly there was indeed a prototype of the 3-door that was never put into production, as you can see here. And just for completeness, there was also a prototype of a saloon, but I think you'll agree that it's probably a good thing that didn't go into production, I have to say. Rear door card is very much the same sort of theme as the front one, with the door pull and the Skoda embossed into it. I don't know whether that is air ventage. I can't imagine that is a speaker grille, because it wouldn't have rear speakers, would it? But I could be wrong. We have obviously a little ashtray here in the door, which is quite sweet. Looking at the rear, it does seem really very spacious, I have to say. That passenger seat I've just been sitting in is actually quite far back, and I've got loads of leg room. And if I gracefully step into the car, there we are, and not sit on Simon's brochure, you'll see that I have tons of legroom here in the back of the Favorit. It's an excellent place to be. I've got loads of good visibility as well, because we've got these headrests with the cut through. I can see so much. It's actually a really nice place to be here in the back. Apart from the ashtray, there aren't very many toys, but there are headrests, supposedly. Obviously, seat belts are fitted because it is a 90s car. It feels 80s, doesn't it? That's the thing I wanted to say whilst I was sitting here in the back. It does feel super 80s, this car. And I think that might be its Achilles heel, to be honest. Things like the vinyl headlining, the kind of quite small, kind of hard grab handles, the body-coloured metal on the doors, the vinyl, pressed vinyl or heated vinyl door cards, all gives you that very 80s vibe, which is great. I love a 1980s vibe, but this car was launched, in the UK at least, at the very end of that decade, in 1989, a time where even the Mark III Fiesta was launched, and that didn't have any body-coloured metal on its doors anymore. They had moved on from that. And I think that might be why the Favorit was never that much of a success in this country. I think people saw it as being old-fashioned and cheap and didn't then look beyond that to see the really interesting design intricacies that came through in the car. And actually, I kind of agree with that, to be honest, because having sat in the car and been driven in the car, it does feel extremely 1980s. And for an 80s car, it's really good. It's refined, it's comfortable, it's got a really nice ride. But for a 90s car, which is what this really is, it does feel really very outdated. So you can see why Skoda were struggling and did end up needing that Volkswagen buyout to bring them perhaps into the more modern era and become the kind of competitive, successful car company they are today. It's a real shame that that didn't happen with the British car industry, isn't it? The last bit of brown I'm going to mention in this car is the seat belts, because the seat belts are also brown, and I just love that level of attention to detail. They did not just go to the seatbelt manufacturer and order the cheapest black ordinary seatbelt that every other car would have. So the beautiful colour of this car is called Pacific Blue, and there's the original sticker and paint code in the engine bay. That's really nice. So let's have a look at this engine whilst we are in the engine bay. So this is the Skoda 1.3 engine, dates from the early 60s, and it's an OHV engine. So again, by sort of 1992 standards, this is quite old-fashioned, although to be fair, Ford were still using their kind of Kent, Valencia HCS engines in the Escort and the Fiesta, so it's not completely unknown. I do really like that sort of strengthening panel there between the wing and the suspension turret. There's something quite industrial about it and very satisfying. We also have quite an old-fashioned coil, and this does have a carburettor and a choke, but it is an automatic choke, so we do get at least that kind of concession to modernity. So on that note, shall we get this car on the road and see how it drives? I really hope that the microphone picks up the sound that the engine makes, because it's a really tappy, ticky, very pleasant OHV engine sound. Because as I said earlier, the engine dates from the 1960s, and it does have it's got that kind of hollow, free revving OHV sound that's really lovely. Oh, that's got a decent bit of poke once we get up the hill. That's nice. That's nice. The engine noise is kind of always there. You're always hyper aware of it. It's not unpleasant. It doesn't sound like it's being stressed or thrashed or anything. But again, by sort of 1992, it does feel a little dated. But, you know, Ford were still using their OHV engines in modified form, so it wasn't the wrong thing to do. This engine actually carried on even later into the Felicia, and then into even the early Fabias had it, but in a highly modified form. The gearbox has quite a lot of travel to it, but it's very positive. Like, you know, it goes into the gear, you're never going to be questioning which gear you're in. Controls, the clutch and the accelerator pedal are quite responsive and light, not unpleasant at all. And the general ride of the car is very, very kind of soft and compliant. It's not crashy or bouncy or thrashy in any way at all. Oh, brakes take a little bit of getting used to. Okay, let's accelerate on a normal road that isn't so bumpy. So yeah, we do work that little 56 horsepower 1.3 engine, don't we, to get moving, especially uphill. But it does pull, it pulls nice and cleanly. Right, accelerate up to 50, up a hill. You have to work it, but it's not screaming, it's not unpleasant. a very happy engine. Very happy engine. Right, let's go for fifth, which feels kind of wrong with an OHV engine that sounds like this. Oh, nice. It's a very refined cabin otherwise, but it does have that very 80s feel. You're quite upright, you've got the body coloured metal. It does feel like you're in an 80s car, very much so. Apart from the fifth gear. Yeah, puts a smile on my face, I have to say, it really does. The steering wheel's really nice to hold. It's just got lots of lovely squidginess to it, which you would not expect. You kind of expect it to be a very austere steering wheel, and it's not. It's really nice to hold. I can imagine that on a long journey it's actually pretty comfortable. Nowhere to rest your clutch foot though, that I can find. Kind of going around the corners, it rolls a little bit. We have a bit of body roll, but it's not excessive at all. I'd say it's not as planted as perhaps the Astra I have. And it's not as rolly as a 340. It's maybe somewhere in the middle. Well, I think that brings me to the end of this video. Thank you ever so much for joining me and for watching. And thank you very, very much indeed to Simon for letting me have at his car and geek out over the fabulous little design features and touches that it has. And it's a real privilege to actually be in it because it's an incredibly rare car. The Forum base model, there's only one other one in the UK, and that isn't currently on the road. So this is the only Forum base model that is on the road. So yeah, it's a real privilege to be able to drive it and bring it to you to see, and hopefully you've really enjoyed and got the same kind of kick out of it as me, of some of the real design cues that this car has. That's so surprising for a budget Eastern European car that most people dismiss. And so I hope after watching this video that you won't dismiss the Favorit any longer, and that it might even become your favourite Skoda as well. Oh, that was cheesy. See you in the next one. Bye. This was registered in Clarion Cars Worthing. This is Bellamy's of Worthing. So these two cars, that was registered in October 92 and this in November 92. So they could well have met on the road in Worthing 32 odd years ago. That's just so much fun, and they reunited here today.